Hearing of the Finance and Governance Committee to order. We are here to discuss the proposed bond package that will go before voters this November that council will be taking up and considering. And so first off, I want to get started and thank all of those that have got us here to this day, and for those in the administration as well as my colleagues. Before I get started, any of my colleagues here, Councilmember De Akauer, Councilmember Lord Esperosa de Padilla, Councilmember White, and Vice Chair Dorns, any opening comments from any of my colleagues? All right, great. We will roll right into it. Today's hearing is really to focus on the proposed bond package, $1.9 billion that is being proposed by the administration. This bond package will go before voters, and it helps to finance our capital improvements plans throughout the coming years. The purpose of those bond proceeds, again, is capital in nature. What we will walk through today is the different clauses and what those different amounts are. Last week, we heard from our departments around the housing portion specific to that bond package, which is proposed to be $500 million. Today, we will be discussing the remaining items of the bond package: safety, health, and infrastructure at $250 million, recreation and parks at $250 million, neighborhood development / affordable housing, again, the $500 million, public service, $400 million, and public utilities at $500 million. These are critical dollars for infrastructure projects that we go across the entire city and do every single year. Later this year, council will actually be taking up the capital budget, so it's fitting that we are having this conversation now about the bond package that will be going before voters. Tonight's hearing is simple in structure. We will start with a presentation from our Department of Finance. Following the presentations and questions from my colleagues, we will open the floor to speakers who have signed up to speak. Additionally, my team will be monitoring our Facebook feed as well as our YouTube feed to take questions as they come in. Depending on the specificity of any questions raised by residents, either I or the department will respond to each of those. And again, if it's not something that we can answer here today, we'll make sure that we get that answer to the public. The capital, the bond package you'll hear about tonight is what is being proposed. Again, this will have to go before voters. Council will also have to adopt a resolution before it goes to the Board of Elections, which I know our director is going to go over. So with that, I will kick it over to Director Long, our Director of the Department of Finance. Director, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chair Bankston, Vice Chair Dorans, and also thanks to Council Members Barosa de Padilla, Beatty, De Akauer, and Weish. Very thankful for your time and consideration today and for your leadership, quite frankly, in considering this $1.9 billion voted bond package. Just a few notes of thanks as well. Certainly appreciate and thank Mayor Ginfer for his leadership. Would like to thank, of course, all City Council members for their leadership. Of course, Auditor Kilgore for her partnership and guidance and all things capital related, and certainly my staff, specifically Kyle Severhart, who heads up our debt management team. Oops. There it is. Okay. There we go. So council members, this first slide just gives some historical perspective on previous voted bond packages. This slide takes us back to 1991. And as you can see, there's with an outlier of 2008, there's a slow, steady progression of voted bond package requests that we've submitted to our residents. 1991, we had a little over $500 million that was successful voted bond package, and that's trend has been a slow, steady upward trend all the way up to this fall. We're hoping to pass a $1.9 billion measure. You will notice in 2008 there is a spike, a little over $1.6 billion there. The primary driver for that was our public utilities department, our Department of Power and Water. There's a couple large infrastructure projects that year that were tunnel and infrastructure related that caused that large issuance. You'll notice that in 2016 through 2025, you'll see that it's like a stack bar. There's a blue section and a green section. The green sections in 2016, 19, and 2022 are meant to represent remaining capacity that we still have. We have not expended all of those voted bond packages yet, but that's to be expected. You'll see we have $66 million remaining in 2016, $250 million remaining in 2019, and about $940 million related to 2022. This is largely related to our Public Utilities Department. They're fortunate enough to leverage OWDA or state funding. It's a very flexible, low-cost revenue source, and so they don't always have to leverage voted bond authority. So they will utilize these dollars. It's just the spend down is lagging a bit.
And just to be clear with that, Director, before you move on, particularly around utilities, utilizing ODWA, so the Ohio Department of Water Authority. When you say that those dollars are still there, just to level set with folks, those bonds haven't necessarily been issued, right? So I want to level set with folks there when you say that the authority is still there, but we haven't issued the actual bonds.
Chair Bankston, thanks for the clarity. Yes, the authority is there, but we have not issued those dollars, expended those dollars. Yes.
And again, is that because simply those other access that they have, is that better interest rates? Is it better financing? Is that why they choose that versus doing a traditional bond?
Chair Banks, an excellent question. It's sort of all those things. It's a more flexible funding source. It's a low-cost funding source, and it's a low-interest funding source. And so many times our partners in public utilities will leverage those dollars first as a means to just really maximize funding capacity. And then we have, of course, our own voted authority that can be leveraged as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. This next slide, this particular pie chart just gives a brief breakdown or proposed breakdown of the $1.9 billion voted bond package. You'll see our public utilities component is $500 million. Our affordable housing piece is, this is the part that's materially different than what we've seen in the last few voted bond packages. It's $500 million. We have safety, health, and infrastructure of $250 million, recreation and parks of $250 million, and public service of $400 million. And I know that we speak of this often. Your leadership certainly does here on council about the need for additional affordable housing investments, and I know there was just a public hearing on that, so no need to revisit that, but just a notable a call out on that. As Chair Bankston mentioned, the $1.9 billion voted bond package provides voted authority. It does not represent cash in hand, right? It doesn't represent capital budgets that have been adopted. And so the next few slides just simply indicate the types of projects that would be presented to City Council for your consideration that could be spend downs from the voted bond package. And so I won't read through all of these, but many of them are fairly obvious, right? Our affordable housing initiative of $500 million would support affordable housing construction and permanent supportive housing, shelter repair. Our public service component would support a lot of the Vision Zero work that I know is incredibly important to Councilmember Barosa de Padilla and Director Scacco, and it's certainly all these Councilmember Barosa de Padilla speaks of often: roadway improvements and resurfacing and bridge rehabilitation, bikeway development, pedestrian safety improvements. Our public utilities component would be utilized for sanitary sewer, street lighting, and water and stormwater improvements. And certainly our recreation and parks section would deal with existing facility renovations and hard surface improvements and street trees and rec centers, and of course, strategic acquisition of new land and new facilities for community utilization. And then finally, our safety and our health and our infrastructure component would go towards things such as, police and fire facility renovation, new construction of facilities, fire apparatus replacement, and also our new proposed municipal court building construction project, which is currently in the early phases of design. This slide really gives some tangible projects where previous voted authority was actually utilized. It was leveraged to invest in these different community projects. $100 million towards affordable housing. These were coming from the 2019 and 2022 voted bond packages collectively, and it includes not only new affordable housing, but housing preservation and critical home repair. Just a couple examples from public service, over $150 million in street resurfacing and $33 million for our refuse vehicles. And again, these are just a few examples to give everyone a sense of where these voted dollars get invested. Recreation and parks, obviously our newly opened Fran Ryan Center utilized $22 million, just recently opened. $26 million for the Kilbourne Run Sports Park. Phase 1 is completed in 2025 with full completion anticipated for next year. And then $12 million for Glenwood and Windsor Pools, which were completed last year. Safety, health, and infrastructure, the new Fire Station 36, which is currently in construction and is scheduled for completion next year. And then the recently completed facility renovations of the third and fourth floor at Columbus Public Health are some notable improvements. Also, just as a call out, the newly contemplated public safety campus and real-time crime center will be utilizing voted authority for construction on that. The next slide just is a couple of call outs with respect to like why issue voted debt as opposed to unvoted debt. And I think it's easy to have misconceptions about is this voted bond package does not mean new or higher property taxes. So the voted authority provides a collateral or security for the repayment, but it has always been the city's intent, remains the city's intent, to pay for any future capital budget issuances from this voted debt from the city's 25% set aside. And so that's the next bullet point. All of this debt, or at least general obligation debt, will be supported by that 25 cents of every income tax dollar that comes in gets reserved in our income tax set aside account. That's what we will utilize to pay for voted authority debt, not property taxes.
And Director, have we ever had to raise property taxes to meet that debt obligation?
Great question, Chair Banks, and yes, but it was all the way back in 1956, and since then the city has, maintained its promise not to leverage that funding source.
Thank you. And then speaking of that as well, 25 cents set aside for the majority of it. The utility side is paid for by ratepayers, right? Which is more than just the residents of Columbus. It is anyone who is getting water or sewer from the city.
Yeah, Chair Banks, a great call out. Yes, enterprise debt or ratepayer debt is supported by all ratepayers of our division of power.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And water, yes. In addition to, voted debt not actually leveraging property taxes, that it's paid for out of our existing income tax pool, right, which is not increasing. Voted debt is also cheaper. And it's typically 10 to 25 basis points cheaper than unvoted debt. And obviously, anytime our costs at the city are smaller, are less, right, it enhances our ability to do more for the community. So cheaper debt means more capacity, which means greater ability to actually do capital projects. So that's a huge savings. And also, certainly voted debt allows for voter input, citizen input, whether it be in public hearings or at the in our various outreach and engagement activities. One other element that's not on this slide, but it's certainly extremely important, is Ohio Revised Code caps the amount of general obligation debt that cities can issue that is unvoted. And so that's capped at 10 mils. And so the city can find itself in a position of not being able to issue new debt. And so issuing and adopting voted debt is an expansion beyond that 10 mil limitation imposed by Ohio Revised Code. So it expands our capacity and ability to invest in the community. And again, as Chair Bankston called out, this voted bond package is just additional authority. It does not represent actual cash. It does not represent actual projects at this phase. All future capital improvement budgets and capital improvement plans will be submitted to City Council for their consideration that will really outline and identify specific projects, specific line items, and specific spending plans. This simple graphic really just is my attempt to sort of like put all these relationships on a single page. I mean, at the top, we obviously have us at the City of Columbus. Our voters pledge as security property taxes. Again, no intent to levy any property taxes there. Haven't since 1956. But that voted authority then allows us to prepare and produce for City Council's consideration future capital improvement budgets. And that's the small circle at the bottom. Those capital improvement budgets, right, once adopted, then can lead to a bond sale. That bond sale then results in cash that the city receives to actually implement all the capital improvement projects, which is the purple sphere or circle in the center. Again, as Chair Bankston mentioned earlier, this next slide is just a proposed timeline of how the voted bond package would roll out. First step is resolutions of necessity. These are council considering for our collective ability to proceed and actually file with the Franklin County Auditor the ability to not only put this on the ballot, but also for the Franklin County Auditor to calculate the property taxes associated with that. So it's that first step, our resolutions of necessity. These dates are fluid, but hoping for council to consider that on or around June 9th. The next step would be these certified resolutions will be presented to the Franklin County Auditor's Office, and they actually calculate and establish millage amounts. And it takes them a minimum of 2 weeks to prepare those calculations. Third step, which would be in July, would be resolutions to proceed, which would be a separate series of resolutions that we would present to all of you for your consideration. And these would contain the actual ballot language that we would propose be presented to voters in November for their consideration, not only amounts, but specific millage amounts, specific ballot language, and the ability to file with the Board of Elections. And then the final step, obviously, is actually submitting that ballot language officially to the Board of Elections to put on the ballot. And the deadline for that is August 6th. So that's really the one really hard date in here that we're just trying to work back from.
Director, for folks who are watching and may not be familiar, can you talk about what a millage amount is?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Barosa de Padilla. So millage is a specific sort of calculation phenomenon that occurs in property tax valuation. You'll see some actual examples here in a second, but it's basically the percentage of a home's value that's subject to a particular property tax. So it's kind of a odd terminology, but that's more or less what. that term means.
No, that's helpful. I just want to ensure, years ago, I was on the millage committee for CCS when they were looking for it, and it's just a term that many folks are not familiar with. And so I just want to make sure that as folks are watching, they can be on the journey with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And that's a wonderful lead-in by Councilmember Barosa de Padilla. The next slide actually shows some of what she was asking about, which is like sample millage language and ballot language. But there is a notable change that will occur this year. So I know this is hard to read, but that first section you'll see reads the 2022 ballot language sample. So this is an actual sample from the 2022 voted bond package. And what I kind of want to draw your attention to is you'll notice the two underlined sections. The millage is calculating on cents based on $100 of tax valuation for a home, right? And so back in 2022, you would have seen this presented to the voters as it's going to cost you 11 cents, right, on every $100 of property valuation. What has changed significantly is the second example, and this was a state ballot language change. Now the millage calculation isn't based off of $100 of property valuation, it's on every $100,000 of property valuation. Why that's significant is you'll notice that in 2022, the original language would have resulted in around 11 cents of the calculation based on $100 of tax valuation. Now that would have been presented as $112. And so while the underlying calculation largely remains, the millage hasn't changed, right? But the base on which that millage is being calculated has changed. And so I think there's a concern that may appear to voters as if there's some intent to levy a property tax which would result in some material financial burden on taxpayers. And that is not the intent. And so I'll pause again because that's something that we're a little concerned about.
Can you give folks just a little, why was that change made?
Honestly, Councilmember, I'm not sure. We're still trying to find out the exact reason for that. We've made inquiries if we could either supplement the language or clarify the language. We've been working with our bond counsel to see if that's a possibility. Right now, we don't believe that it is, but we're trying to get more information. I'm happy to share that when we have it.
But to be clear, the amount doesn't necessarily change, but the wording just could be confusing. Because obviously, if you're looking at 11 cents versus $112, that hits a little different. So, okay.
Yeah, Councilmember, 100% right. And yes, I'll pause and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director. I will go around the dice to see if my colleagues have. Mr. Vice Chair?
Yeah, Director, just a sort of a process question around, the utilization of voter-approved bonds. So, we've enjoyed a lot of success over the last several decades of having voters recognize the benefit that comes from having, this type of support at the ballot box in order for us to be able to fund these kinds of things. Columbus is somewhat unique in the sense of we've been very fiscally responsible and, again, setting aside, a quarter of every dollar to make sure that we're paying these things down. But, let's go to Fantasyland here for a second. If, in fact, the voters would not approve this, how would that change the approach of the city, either as to capital budgeting generally or to what specifically being identified here as priorities within this budget? How would that affect the city's sort of path forward here, in your opinion?
No, President Pro Tem Dorans, just excellent question. And so, as I hinted at earlier, Ohio Revised Code caps the city at what we call inside millage, which is just the amount of debt that we can issue that's based solely off our ability to utilize special income tax revenues for that. If this ballot measure were to fail, in my opinion, it would significantly impact the city's future ability not only to have the financial resources that it needs to invest in the community, but our average cost associated with these projects would go up substantially. So it limits our total debt capacity, and the debt capacity we do have is much more expensive. And so it would, we could certainly work on some calculations for you, but it would be material and significant.
Thank you. And again, like when we talk about the approach of utilizing this kind of funding mechanism, if folks care about the ability for new fire stations or parks, or again, being able to invest in affordable housing, this is the most cost-effective way for the city to do so. Is that sort of a fair way to put it?
100%, President Pro Tem Dorrance.
Thank you.
And thank you for that clarification, Mr. Vice Chair. And I always akin the capital budget is, it's really one way for us as residents, when you think about like the business of the city, like we are as residents have to make these investments. And so this is basically us saving ourselves money, right, by doing that. And so, because Director, correct me if I'm wrong, we still have the ability as a municipality to issue debt without the backing of voters, but it would just cost us significantly more to make those improvements. And probably we wouldn't be able to do as many projects because of that. And so when I say that the capital budget is the things that you touch and feel, it is really, I think, where you actually get to see the city like live and breathe, and it is like part of who you are. So that's how I always see it. Councilmember Watch.
Thank you, Chair. And Director, thank you for walking through the overview. It's always helpful. I just want to talk a little bit about public utilities, right? Obviously, we have the unused debt that has kind of accrued over the last couple of years. Can you speak to why we're seeking more authority for public utilities specifically?
Yeah, excellent question, Councilmember Weish. And so, I would just say that the relationship with the OWDA is currently evolving. Director Eighth has done an amazing job with leadership, but they've recently instituted certain caps. And so on certain types of lending that they would be willing to issue to the city. And when I say that's evolving, there's ongoing conversations the director is having. I know that Auditor Kilgore is involved in those conversations as well. And so while that conversation happens, we want to ensure that the Public Utilities Department isn't constrained from a funding perspective, since they have a number of incredibly important infrastructure projects that are being mapped out for the future. It would be great to have that backstop of having $500 million of our own voted authority. Doesn't mean we have to issue it again, but we have that in sort of our back pocket, if you will, in case some of the OWDA caps become more firm or implemented in different ways. So not sure if that helps answer it or not, but.
No, it does, and I just wanted to highlight that, especially for my colleagues, because you will hear every Monday when we're passing these ordinances, a lot of them are contingent upon getting that loan from OWDA. So just want to make sure we're all kind of aware of those conversations that are happening as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any of my other colleagues? One other question I did want to bring up to Director, and I know we talk about this and sometimes we just gloss over it. Talk about that 25-cent set aside. We talk about it here about capacity and what we could borrow, but also part of that borrowing is our bond rating. How much does voter authority and also that fiscal responsibility, how much does that play into our bond rating? And then how does that translate into the capital projects that we would be voting on through this bond package?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bankston. And yes, incredibly important. So the fact that we cap ourselves, right, at 25, that 25% set aside is our sole resource for general obligation debt for debt service. So if we don't have that 25 cents capacity built up in the income tax set aside account, we don't issue it. And so that's self-imposed limitation, right, ensures that we're being fiscally responsible. In addition, that voted authority that you mentioned, Chair Bankston, gives us that additional security on that type of debt. So that additional security, coupled with the 25% set aside, all plays into the city's AAA bond rating, which is Auditor Kilgore is amazing at safeguarding. And that, again, results in lower cost of funds, which increases our ability to invest in community projects and investments in our community, because we're not paying that in interest, so we can issue more. Hope that answers it.
Thank you for that. Any questions from my colleagues before we move to public testimony? All right. With that, we will move to our speakers. I believe by the start of this hearing, we just had one speaker slip. Dr. Birch, good to see you again. Oh, come on up. Yep, yes, ma'am. Welcome back to council, and just state your name, any organization that you're representing, and then you have 3 minutes.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Chair Bankston, Vice Chair Dorans, Councilman White, Councilman Barroso Differdia, sorry, Councilman Beatty, as well as Councilman Dialco. Certainly appreciate being in front of you here today. My name is Dr. Sean Birch. I am the Executive Director of Resident Resources Network. Resident Resources Network is a nonprofit that works directly on the front lines of affordable housing, where we are partnering with residents to make sure that they're having the opportunity to go above beyond just having a roof over their head. Actually trying to make sure that they are having a greater ability to be connected to resources that are going to help with stability, mobility, as well as dignity. And I'm here today because I am urging this body to consider requiring the integration of resident services as a core component in any affordable housing development that receives capital bond financing. I mean, just to be kind of clear, when you think about housing with services, without services, really is just kind of shelter, right? But housing with services becomes a launching pad for workforce inclusion, for education enrollment, for long-term tenancy, all those sorts of things that are ultimately over time resulting in long-term savings to both cities as well as citizens alike. And so we would say, you know, if you think about building a school, you wouldn't build a school without teachers. You wouldn't build a hospital without nurses, right? So why continue to build affordable housing without the human infrastructure that makes it work? Certainly want to make sure that you understand that resident services are not fluff. They actually are, we actually have data that says that they are a return on investment. Studies show that resident services decrease evictions, increase employment rates, help to stabilize families faster, and again, all those sorts of things that are resulting in savings to cities and taxpayers, alike. And so we are asking that this committee condition bond financing on a baseline commitment to provide resident services, funded in the operating budgets, embedded in the designs, as well as being sustained through community partnerships. We're not asking for charity. We are asking for a smarter capital investment where you have bricks meeting the boots on the ground. And so when housing is services are a part of housing, it becomes transformational. It's not just a place for somebody to have a roof over their heads. Affordable housing should definitely be the beginning of the better life for somebody and not the end of a waiting list. So I say we just do it right.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Birch, and thank you for all of your advocacy and the work that your organization does. I love that idea. As you know, just this past Monday, Council, we just passed an ordinance to create a division of fair housing. And so I want to make sure that before you leave here, we get your contact information so that we can connect you with our Department of Development to talk about that. I think that is something that we should absolutely be talking about, to your point, not just having a safe place to call home, but how are we also providing our residents the tools and opportunities necessary to really, to thrive and not simply just survive or to have a place. So I love that idea, and definitely want to make sure we connect you with the administration so we can continue those conversations.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, Councilmember White.
And Dr. Birch, appreciate you being here and presenting. You talked about the data in terms of the return on investment. Is that something you can also share with us as well, so we have that information too?
So return on investment certainly comes in all kinds and forms and places, right? We think about return on investment in terms of when we are working with residents and connecting them to those resources that our taxpayer dollars are putting in place for them, that we're helping to make sure we're stewarding them and making sure that those resources are being utilized well. We also are looking at the idea that when we make sure that a resident is not evicted from their housing, that it results in all kind of savings for the property owners and managers as well, in terms of the cost of not having to evict and having to do unit turns and things of that nature. And then, of course, we also just look at the amount of our service coordinators work hard at going and finding those resources that are available in this community. And we absolutely can speak to dollar figures in terms of the amount of monies that we bring in that help to subsidize and support residents.
Yeah, I think any data that kind of speaks to how this work is impacting residents for the better, we'd love to hear it and see it. And I'm sure that a department would be looking for it as well.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, you finished? Okay. Chair, couple questions.
So thank you for your advocacy. I don't know if you got the opportunity to watch the hearing that we had on housing, dealing with the housing bond, where we had the deputy director, the two deputy directors from the Department of Development, one speaking to the Office of Housing Stability, and then also one speaking to how the 2020 and 1999 housing bond dollars were used. And that would be Deputy Director Aaron Prosser and Hannah Jones. And one thing that we talked about in that hearing was trying to bring out and have further discussions regarding the use of those funds. Because when you say it's nice to put affordable housing, but that has a very broad, definition. What we do know is that, and this was mentioned in that particular hearing, is that there's some portion of the dollars will be to LIHTC projects. And then obviously LIHTC projects, as part of receiving those tax credits, require resident services, et cetera. However, that will not be all the dollars, I'm sure. So, but we go back to that definition of affordability, and sometimes affordability goes all the way up to 120 of AMI, which would be more towards workforce housing, your nurses, your teachers, et cetera. And so, which those type of communities that service those communities many times do not have those type of services. Not that they're not necessary, but don't have those type of services. I'm not sure if that's the gap that you're speaking about in particular, but sitting here right now, we don't have the details, the granular details of the intention of the affordable housing program that the administration is putting forward. So I would ask that you, or suggest that get in touch with those particular deputy directors and find out a little bit more about that.
Absolutely would. Absolutely. Appreciate you sharing.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And we'll make sure that we make the contact for you.
All right. Thank you.
Director, I was just checking here online. There was a question raised by Ms. Raven, who I don't know if she's still watching or not, but she said, what is the ballpark savings, that 10 to 20 basis points? Is it in the millions of dollars saved or thousands of dollars saved?
Great question, and thanks for the question. It would be in the millions, Councilmember Banks, and I don't have that total in front of me, but it's significant, and we could run those calculations and make sure we get your office those.
Thank you. And I'll just add to that too, for Ms. Raven, if she's still watching. Again, it is about that savings, but then it is also about that additional capacity for us to be able to do more projects There was also Mr. Tim Hughes who I think commented about basically borrowing money, and I just wanted to just make sure I let him understand there's no way for us to do a capital program or to make these investments without borrowing money. It is just kind of how business is done all across the country, really, of how we fund and finance these types of things. So it is a routine thing. Also, I do, Mr. Hughes, want to point out that it would not be borrowing all $2 billion at once. Our capital, our bonds, or what folks are voting for, is giving us that authority to borrow that money. It is issued as necessary. That is where we do every single year go through a capital budget and work with community members and administration to evaluate how much we're actually going to borrow. Some of those projects are years out, so we don't borrow that money and just sit on it because we don't want to pay that interest, right? We borrow that money as the projects come online. So I just wanted to have that clarification as well. One last question, Director, that I thought about, and I wanted to make sure the public is aware of this too, is when folks go to see this on their ballot, if we proceed with this, they will see 5 different things, right? Why is it that we do it that way versus just saying, here's a bond package, right? Give us, and it's just one issue. Can you talk about those 5 different clauses and why we segment it that way?
Yeah, again, excellent question, Chair Bankston. So a couple of reasons. One is to provide clarity to the community on what type of investments we're going to make and in what amounts. And 2 is these different propositions have specific clauses associated with them. So, for example, we can't use voted authority for safety and infrastructure to invest in recreation parks. So it enforces discipline on the city on how it spends its dollars and invests dollars, and those dollars are invested in ways that the community fully understands and supports.
Thank you for that. All right. Last call from my colleagues. Questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you all again. This is going to be a process. On Monday, council will be considering that resolution for necessity to get the process started. That will then go to the auditor. And again, in July, we will take up another resolution to proceed, which would give the administration authority to go to the Board of Elections. Again, and you would see this on your ballot in November. Between now and then, there will be a lot of education around this, a campaign as well to be able to educate voters. And so this is not the last of this conversation. So thank you, Director, and to your team for putting together that presentation. And also thank you in advance for the capital budget that we will be going through that process here shortly. Also, again, want to thank Mayor Ginther and his leadership as well, particularly around housing. I can't say that enough that this council, we all know that our top priority is housing, and to ensure that we are making the necessary investments to be able to meet the demand and to meet the growth of our city. And so I want to thank the mayor for his vision around that in our State of the City address and going to the voters for that. Seeing no other questions or comments from my colleagues, again, I want to thank everyone for being here. We will conclude this hearing. Thank you. Have a good night.